And of course, we've roped in Sophie Mokoena. She's the SABC News International Editor right here in studio to help us further unpack this. Sophie, a very good afternoon to you. Before we get to that convenience, of the African Union, perhaps let's talk about what do these aggressive U.S. tariffs mean for the African economies, especially when you consider that Lesotho has been imposed with even a greater tariff than in South Africa. That's a 50% tariff.
Well, of course, it's going to be very difficult for smaller countries on the continent. Let's take AGOA, for example. These smaller countries are able to have resources and finances because of this preferential treatment they get through AGOA. Now, as you heard the Minister of Trade and Industry of South Africa last week saying that there's no official announcement in terms of AGOA not being there anymore, but these tariffs means that you don't have AGOA in place. And therefore, these countries were benefiting a lot. For example, some of them were sending their products to South Africa in terms of assisting in completion of some of the cars that are being assembled in South Africa. You know that a country like Ivory Coast, they are producing or doing these car seats, and they send them to South Africa for companies such as Mercedes-Benz and also BMW as part of that AGOA agreement. You have countries such as Lesotho that rely heavily on issues that are related to textile. And for years, that has been a way to generate revenue in that country, but also to create jobs. We visited those factories in Lesotho. There are concerns in relation to these tariffs, and we were told that the Minister of Trade and Industry of Lesotho and others will be traveling to the United States of America to engage the Trump's administration to look at what can be give and take. On the other hand, you have countries such as Botswana, you have countries such as Madagascar, and therefore they are not good for smaller countries. However, even the countries that are more stronger, it is going to be problematic, as we saw in terms of the performance of the markets in South Africa when you look at countries such as Kenya. And that is why the APRM retreat called for an emergency meeting of the heads of state and government to discuss this matter, as they did during COVID-19.
And I want to just talk about that. Of course, this was then a recommendation, particularly when you start, speaking about what are the opportunities that African countries can take here. So just give us a scenario in terms of what then should we expect when that African Union, convention is then held, where the heads of state will then be discussing all of these matters in front of them, particularly when you look at those smaller countries that are now being impacted by these U.S. tariffs?
The role of the APRM is to look at the early warning system that can lead to the continent being in crisis, either economically or politically or security. And therefore, I expect the APRM to send that report as soon as possible to Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, at the headquarters, and present it to the AU Commission Chair, who will then have to engage the chair of the assembly, that is Angola, the president of Angola, so that the president of Angola can convene this special meeting, if it does happen, so that they can discuss this issue. But normally you have a situation where the AU has 2 meetings annually, in February and in June. So some are saying that perhaps they must just wait for the midterm meeting and they can put this on the agenda, while others are saying they can do it virtual, as they were doing during COVID-19. And at that time, they then appointed South African president to lead the mitigating processes and measures, and therefore they are saying that must happen maybe in the DRC, this is what's going to happen.
All right, Sophie, let's just pause there for a moment and just take our viewers to the New York Stock Exchange. I see that it is opening now. All right, of course, these are live visuals from the New York Stock Exchange. It is, of course, opening and, due to our earlier conversation around what these U.S. tariffs now mean for all of those countries that have been imposed by the U.S. administration, and, of course, what also it means for the businesses that are operating within the U.S. country. But Sophie is still with me in a studio. Sophie, as we continue to watch these developments, the implications are quite huge. And one of the questions I was going to ask you was, what do these trade wars mean for Pretoria's foreign policy posture, going forward, especially when you consider that South Africa has to have this balancing act with its BRICS partners, but also other Western partners that it does have?
Well, I think the foreign policy posture will not change. The Minister of Foreign Affairs or International Relations, Ronald Lamola, indicated that South Africa's foreign policy will not change. I think what will change is the bilateral trade agreement, where country to country you then discuss how to meet each other halfway. That will certainly change, and that will be led by the Minister of Trade and Industry, Pakstow, but he will be working with his counterparts within Treasury, within international relations. So I think those engagements will happen, but for now, South Africa has pointed out that after they've appointed that team that will be going to US, these are the engagements that will certainly start soon, because South Africa has accepted that you don't have AGOA anymore, and they will have to engage at the bilateral level.
All right, Sophie, thank you so much for unpacking all of those developments for us. Sophie Mokoena is the SABC's International News Editor. Of course, earlier on, just showing you there the New York Stock Exchange opening amid, of course, all of these uncertainties in the market in light of those Trump administration tariffs imposed on a number of countries across the globe. We'll continue then to give you a sense of what else this has had an impact on